Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I'm Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Julia Chapman.
Thanks, Tanvi. Coming up, foreign aid pours into flood-hit Libya. A formal impeachment inquiry begins into President Joe Biden. And child labor is on the rise in Sudan. But first, the headlines.
North Korea's Kim Jong-un wraps up his Russia visit, says he believes Moscow will triumph against what he describes as evil and the West's imperialism in the Ukraine conflict. Japan lodges a strong protest against North Korea following Pyongyang's latest missile launch, while China calls for dialogue among all parties. 10,000 people are reported missing in Libya after powerful storms and heavy rainfall caused catastrophic flooding. Russian President Vladimir Putin has hosted a lunch for the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, where the two leaders raised a toast to their friendship and held an elaborate discussion on military and political situation in the region. Kim extended his support towards Russia, saying that Russian forces will win against, quote-unquote, evil in Ukraine.
I want to propose a toast to the further strengthening of the friendship and cooperation between our countries, the Russian Federation and Korean People's Democratic Republic, for the well-being and success of our people, for the good health of Comrade Secretary and everyone who is here.
To conclude, I would like to say that I am sure this visit will play an important role in transforming our traditional friendly relations into an unbreakable strategic partnership. I propose to raise a toast for the good health of dear President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, for new victories of the great Russia and unending Russian-Korean friendship, for the good health of all the comrades here.
Further, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un gave his full support to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders met today at a Russian spaceport where they reviewed rockets, and the Russian leader promised to help North Korea build satellites. US officials have warned that the talks between the two leaders could include a potential arms deal, which could see Pyongyang provide weapons for Moscow to use against Ukraine. The two leaders held a one-on-one meeting to strengthen their ties, showing support for Russia. Kim Jong-un said that North Korea's relations with Russia would be his first priority, while Putin said that Kim's visit is an important one for Russia and there are many areas of cooperation. In the run-up to the meeting, Pyongyang and Moscow have been denying plans to exchange arms, but the US and the UK say they are concerned that a weapons deal may help support Moscow's military campaign in Ukraine.
We will continue to identify, expose, and counter Russia's attempts to acquire military equipment from the DPRK or any other state that is prepared to support Russia's war against Ukraine. We urge the DPRK to cease its efforts to transfer arms to Russia.
Russia has convened this council at the same time as North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un crosses the DPRK-Russia border for a meeting with President Putin. There is incontrovertible evidence that Russia is negotiating potential deals for significant quantities and multiple types of munitions from the DPRK to be used against Ukraine.
Meanwhile, North Korea has fired ballistic missiles for the first time while Kim Jong-un is out of the country. The short-range launch took place hours ahead of the North Korean leaders' meeting with President Vladimir Putin in Russia. The two leaders reportedly could sign an arms deal, raising concerns among Washington and its allies about closer military cooperation between Russia and North Korea. Japan's chief cabinet secretary said his country had lodged a strong protest against North Korea following Pyongyang's latest missile launch.
The government will respond in close cooperation with the international community, including the United Nations Security Council and countries including the United States and South Korea, and will continue to make efforts in collection and analysis of information and in warning and surveillance to protect the lives and property of the people.
Chinese Foreign Secretary Mao Ning has said that China hopes that all parties will adhere to the general direction of a political settlement. This was in response to the missile launch by North Korea hours before its leader left for an official visit to Russia.
China pays close attention to the development of the situation on the Korean peninsula. We hope that all parties will adhere to the general direction of a political settlement, resolve their respective concerns in a balanced way through meaningful dialogue, and promote an early realization of long-term peace and stability on the peninsula.
On to Africa now. Foreign aid continues to pour in Libya following the storms and heavy rainfall that have left a reported 10,000 people missing. Search and rescue mission is underway. My colleague Julia Chapman is in London. She's tracking this story and other stories making headlines around the world. Let's go over to Julia now.
The number of people who have died in Libya's Mediterranean city of Derna has reached more than 5,000. Residents say that many people could not escape their houses in time because the deadly floods happened at night. Around 10,000 people have been reported missing after Storm Daniel hit, and a search and rescue mission is continuing. Algeria is providing support and humanitarian aid to its neighbour, including food, medicine, and other basic necessities. Egypt has also joined in the international support effort, offering humanitarian aid. The assistance from another of Libya's neighbours includes medical supplies and tents for shelter, as well as workers from the Egyptian Red Crescent. A Palestinian rescue team from the Ministry of Health is also taking part in efforts to reach survivors in Libya. The Palestinian delegation includes a medical team specialised in surgical operations. On Wednesday, Pope Francis said prayers for the victims of the floods in Libya. In a speech, the Catholic leader appealed to the public to come to the aid of the survivors. In a weekly interaction at St. Peter's Square in the Vatican, the pontiff invited all present to join him in thinking of those who have lost their lives. 5 days after the devastating 6.8 magnitude earthquake hit Morocco, survivors are still awaiting food and water in remote parts of the country. The number of deaths has risen to 2,900 and more than 5,500 people are injured. Countries including Spain, the UK, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates have provided help to the North African country. Meanwhile, the country's king, Mohammed VI, has visited survivors at a hospital in Marrakesh. He's also donated blood and thanked countries for sending aid. Hurricane Lee is re-strengthening over the Atlantic Ocean as it approaches the U.S. northeast. Lee is expected to bring dangerous surf and rip currents to the U.S. East Coast over the coming days, with authorities warning people to take precautions.
Powerful major hurricane centered about 550 miles to the south of the island of Bermuda, still moving off to the west-northwest now, rather slowly at about 8 miles an hour. We've had the NOAA and the Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft out in the storm today, and they're showing that while the peak winds, the intensity of the storm is about the same, the storm continues to grow in size. The hurricane force winds now extend out almost 100 miles from the center. Tropical storm force winds go out about 200 miles from the center. So Lee is growing in size.
The U.S. House of Representatives will open a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. The Speaker of the House, Republican Kevin McCarthy, says they have witnesses who allege abuse of power, obstruction, and corruption. So far, no concrete evidence of misconduct has been made public. Republicans have been investigating the president since they took control of the House in January.
Eyewitnesses have testified that the president joined on multiple phone calls and had multiple interactions. Dinners resulted in cars and millions of dollars into his son's and his son's business partners. We know that bank records show that nearly $20 million in payments were directed to the Biden family members and associates through various shell companies. Biden used his official office to coordinate with Hunter Biden's business partners about Hunter's role in Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company.
House Democrats are complaining that the impeachment probe is a distraction from real political matters. They have called the inquiry an illegitimate waste of time.
And launching this illegitimate impeachment inquiry is certainly a distraction. Instead of focusing on doing the business of the American people, extreme MAGA Republicans are doing the bidding of their puppet master in chief, Donald Trump. When Donald Trump says jump, the extreme MAGA Republicans say how high.
Experts say impeachment inquiries are being used as political tools in the U.S.
It looks like we're involved in a tit-for-tat situation where the parties feel that any effort against a president of their own has to be, in effect, paid back. There has to be payback. And that's a really bad situation for any democracy to be in, because it could obviously just spiral out of control. Every president is going to be subject to impeachment. That's not a good look for us, and it's also a horrible policy distraction.
The ruling junta in Niger said it would end an armed forces accord with neighboring Benin. Niger's military rulers accused their southern neighbor of authorizing the deployment of troops, mercenaries, and war material on its territory. They also accused Benin of involvement in a possible military intervention against Niger by the West African regional bloc in collaboration with former colonial power France.
Conseil national pour la sauvegarde de la patrie.
The Republic of Benin has authorized the stationing of military personnel, mercenaries and war material with a view to an aggression against our country by France in collaboration with certain ECOWAS countries. The National Council for Safeguarding the Homeland and the government of Niger reiterate their determination to avoid escalation, and after having repeatedly reminded the respect of the obligations of the said agreement, decide to denounce the military cooperation agreement of July 11, 2022. In accordance with its Article 23 and the 6 months notice period.
The United Nations Human Rights Chief says ethnically motivated attacks by Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces have killed hundreds of people in West Darfur. People are in desperate need of humanitarian help as fighting between the Sudanese army and the RSF has been ongoing for months. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, said he'd received at least 45 incidents with credible reports.
And in West Darfur, ethnically motivated attacks perpetrated by the RSF and allied Arab militias have resulted in the deaths of hundreds of so-called non-Arab civilians, primarily from Masalit communities. This has mainly occurred in the capital, El Janina, but also in at least 8 other locations. The RSF now controls all but 2 localities in West Darfur. Such developments echo a horrific past that must not be repeated.
Meanwhile, child labor is on the rise in Sudan after months of conflict in the country. Millions of people have fled the capital Khartoum to safer parts of Sudan, but agencies believe many children are now working so they can help support their families. Naba Mohideen reports from Sudan.
15-year-old Sami Ahmed is a tuk-tuk driver. He fled the conflict in Khartoum in May. He's now living in Al Jazeera state, about 100 kilometers away from home.
I have 5 siblings and my parents. I earn less than $10, but at least I can feed my family. I want to finish my school and become a teacher, but now I can't because of the war and because my family needs me.
He's one of the estimated 3 million children in Sudan who have stopped schooling in order to work since the conflict broke out. Abdul Gadir is another.
Within the Middle East and North Africa, Sudan is the country with the largest number of children who don't go to school. According to the United Nations, more than 3.6 million children did not attend the school or were subjected to child labor in 2021. That number has likely doubled due to conflicts and mass internal displacement of people.
Sudan was one of the first countries to ratify the Convention on the Rights of the Children, CRC, in 1990, but years of political and economic instability have hindered the preservation of children's rights and paved the way for more child labor. Other factors that contribute to this issue include widespread poverty, displacement, and informality of employment agreements for children.
This issue has been growing over years, and the economy is the biggest challenge. The figures are scary, and we expected that very little percentage of Sudanese children will go back to schools even if the war stops. Supporting families and enhancing economy contribute in decreasing child labour.
The conflict in Sudan has entered its 5th month with no sign of ending soon. Sudanese families are hoping for a lasting resolution that could bring millions of children like Sami Abdul Qadir back to their schools. Naba Muhiddin, reporting from Al Jazeera State in Sudan for DD India.
That's it from me here in London. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Julia. My colleague Julia Chapman joining us from our London bureau. Still to come on DD India Global. Japan's Prime Minister has overhauled his cabinet, appointing more women to the top jobs. Pop star Taylor Swift wins big at the MTV Video Music Awards 2023.
India that invents. India that innovates. India that excites. India that invites. Land of possibility. Teeming with opportunities. Watch India Ideas each Thursday, 8 p.m. only on DD India.
Thanks for staying with us. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Next news from Japan. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has overhauled his cabinet, appointing more women to top jobs. Former Justice Minister Yoko Kamikawa takes over as Foreign Secretary. The first time a woman has led Japan's foreign ministry since 2004. The reshuffle means that a quarter of Japan's cabinet posts are now filled by women. DD India's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
The Prime Minister is looking to mix the old with the new. He needs to improve the approval ratings of his administration, which has languished in the low 30s for quite some time. He also has his own leadership of the party and of the government up for renewal next year. So he also needs to secure his own political fortunes. By doing that, he needs to secure his main supporters inside the party and in the base of voters, while also trying to improve his numbers by bringing in new faces. And so we see a retention of the old guard. The Chief Cabinet Secretary, Matsuno, he remains. Shunichi Suzuki, the Finance Minister, remains. Those closest to the Prime Minister are all remaining. However, at the same time, we are seeing that a quarter of cabinet is now being made up of women, and particularly Yoko Kamikawa has moved from justice into foreign affairs. So we should get used to that name, Yoko Kamikawa, because it's going to be coming up very often as Japan pursues its diplomatic ties and its relations in the coming months. But also, she is a very important figure to represent Japan on the global stage, which does not have the best representation for female empowerment. 90% of Japan's top brass and companies are men. 90% of parliamentarians are men. When Japan hosted the G7 summit, particularly the gender equality meeting back in June, the other 6 G7 nations all sent female representatives for a meeting on women's empowerment. Japan sent Masanobu Ogura, a man, the only country to do so. So it needs some catching up to do, but also it needs to solidify its base voters, health, construction. These are the portfolios which see new faces to reinvigorate the older population, the male population, which usually votes for the LDP, while securing those who are closest to the Prime Minister. Chris Gilbert in Tokyo, reporting for DD India.
Still with Asia, United Arab Emirates has expressed its appreciation of the consensus reached by the Gulf Cooperation Council nations to proceed with the ratification of the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. The Kigali Amendment will help curb up to 0.4 degrees Celsius of global warming in this century, while continuing to protect the ozone layer. The amendment will substantively contribute to the goals of the Paris Agreement. Ahead of the 2023 Sustainable Development Goals SDG Summit, the United Nations has unveiled the Global Sustainable Development Report 2023. Compiled by 15 diverse experts, the report launched calls for transformational shifts rooted in science that would urgently reverse course and turbocharge the Sustainable Development Goals.
We urge the international community to focus on increasing resilience to the various interlinked crises societies and countries are going through, to improve the critical underlying conditions for transformative action. So this includes coordinated action for the prevention of violent conflict and action to resolve ongoing conflict, because the longer a society is in conflict, the more time it loses for implementing the SDGs and improving human development.
Now let's take a look at what else is happening around the world. Just a day after the launch of the new iPhone 15, France bans the sale of iPhone 12, citing high radiation. The country's radiation watchdog carried out tests which showed that the device's radiation level was slightly higher than legally allowed. Football team Manchester United gets the US tech giant Qualcomm's Snapdragon as the new sponsor that will be printed on the players' jerseys from the coming season. It replaces the Team Viewer logo in a deal worth over $74 million. French Finance and Economy Minister Bruno Le Maire attended a German cabinet meeting chaired by Chancellor Olaf Scholz hours after the European Union announced a probe into Chinese electric vehicles. Indian Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhry has received the delivery of the first C-295 transport aircraft from Airbus in Spain. The Ministry of Defence signed a contract with the European plane maker for as many as 56 C-295s in 2021. Under the agreement, Airbus will deliver the first 16 aircraft by 2025, with the subsequent 40 planes being manufactured and assembled in India.
Today's event is important for many reasons. First is, of course, that we are adhering to the schedule. There was a schedule put. There's a lot of delay in the negotiations. Finally, the contract was signed about 2 years ago, and we were not sure because there are a lot of legal complications whether the delivery schedule could be adhered on time. So I'm very happy that we have not only adhered to the delivery schedule, but we've done it 10 days in advance. This is probably one of the best Make in India programs we have implemented ever. It's out of this 56 aircraft. You see, a plane has about 14,000 plus parts. Out of it, 13,600 parts will be made in India, which tells you how much of it will be made in India. Earlier, it used to be only an assembly job. Now the production will have to be made in India.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will lay the foundation stone of a new petrochemical complex in the Indian central state of Madhya Pradesh on Thursday. Pankaj Jain, the secretary at the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, spoke exclusively to DD India's Aditya Srivastav on how the petroleum sector will expand and create employment opportunities.
On Thursday, Prime Minister will lay foundation stone of petrochemical complex in Bina Refinery. We are with us, Secretary, Petroleum and Natural Gas Ministry, Pankaj Jain. Sir, how important is this project? Prime Minister will lay a foundation stone of this, the very important project.
So this project is not only ambitious, it is absolutely critical, not only to the economy of Bundelkhand and this region, but also towards meeting Prime Minister's far-sighted target of a 5 trillion economy, because what it does is the complexity that we are trying to do, the technologies we are trying to bring in over here will allow us not only to expand the refinery but also to produce petrochemicals.
Sir, is this complex is making a job creator of especially a Bundelkhand area or MP area?
During the construction period of 5 years, job creation will be about 15,000 jobs. But the real kicker happens after the project gets commissioned, because by then the downstream factories come up, and those downstream factories themselves would be in a position to provide almost 1 lakh jobs.
Sir, India is targeting $5 trillion economy. How this project is helpful to achieving this target?
In the oil and gas sector, it takes the form of refineries and petrochemical sector. And therefore, without an anchor investment, downstream doesn't happen. So if 5 trillion is to happen, then it will require these kind of anchor investments, and that is exactly what is being done.
This is a very important project for not only Madhya Pradesh, but also a petroleum sector of India. With camera person Pradyum Dubey, Aditya Srivastav, DD India.
India's Minister for Information and Broadcasting, Anurag Singh Thakur, on Wednesday announced major cabinet decisions. While addressing a press conference, the minister said that the Indian government has approved free 7.5 million LPG connections under the Ujjwala Yojana in the next 3 years.
9 करोड़ 60 लाख रसोई गैस के सिलेंडर अब तक दिए जा चुके हैं उज्ज्वला योजना के अंतर्गत, और आज मुझे कहते हुए प्रसन्नता है कि 75 लाख मुफ्त LPG के कनेक्शन अब और दिए जाएंगे मांग को देखते हुए, ताकि गरीब और जरूरतमंद महिलाओं को इसका लाभ मिल सके.
On the success of the G20 summit in India, Anurag Singh Thakur said a resolution was moved by India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh congratulating Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the successful completion of the G20 summit.
भारत की भूमि पर भारत के नेतृत्व में जो सफलता G20 में मिली है, उसको लेकर एक और माननीय रक्षा मंत्री जी ने जहाँ एक रेजोल्यूशन मूव किया माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी को और देशवासियों की ओर से बधाई देते हुए कि G20 के सफल आयोजन पीएम के कुशल नेतृत्व और दृढ़ इच्छा शक्ति का एक प्रतीक भी है, और इसकी चर्चा आज न केवल भारत में बल्कि पूरे विश्व में हो रही है.
Now, as we wind up DD India Global, let's talk about the MTV Video Music Awards. Well, international pop star Taylor Swift won the top honor at the MTV Video Music Awards 2023. Out of the 9 awards won, the highlight was the Video of the Year, which is a fan-voted award. At the gala night, Swift also won various other accolades, including the Artist of the Year, the Song of the Year Award, Best Artist and Best Direction. Taylor Swift is now the second artist to win the most awards in a competition in a single night. So with that, it's a wrap in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online on YouTube as well. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.